we put the Zoom link up on Facebook, all sorts of hell can happen. Hamish and Andy might, you know, gate crashes and
We will have
Zoom bomber.
photo bombs everywhere. There'll be gate crashes. There'll be alcohol spilt. Everyone will be sticking to their carpet in their homes. Yeah, it could be mayhem.
Yeah, Pete. I mean, you were saying that you're actually pretty impressed with the whole thing. You're like me. You enjoyed the whole tyre strategy thing.
Yeah, there were different winners, and it was pretty much, though it was reduced, the pit crew was reduced. It was pretty much a team sport, which is what motorsport is. You know, you've got your pit crew and your drivers and your engineers, so it sort of enhanced all that. You know.
Yeah, I like I said online, I think it's one of the things that with it is that you can it brings in the whole endurance vibe into sprint racing. I find sprint racing, particularly for sort of a one make series like Supercars, and Supercars to all intents and purposes is a one make series. For something like that, sprint races, it can be fairly boring, but this adds a whole level of complexity. And now teams and drivers have got to make the decision in terms of, I mean, do we do what Scotty McLaughlin did and just bolt on the super softs at the start of the race, head out there, go hell for leather, and go as fast as we can, win the first race, and then manage for the rest of the weekend, or do you play that long term game and try and stagger out your tyres depending on where you qualify or what the conditions might be? I just think it adds something. It gives the media something else to talk about too, because let's face it, most weekends at the supercar rounds, if you tune in and you watch live, I mean there's a lot of navel gazing goes on, but there's really nothing much.
It's a procession, isn't it, Brett? And it really adds a spice, and it keeps everyone guessing. As you said, the commentators not only know what's going to happen, they're trying to predict, and usually, they're not going to be right, so they have to be very careful with their predictions as well, though, too. And it adds some fun to it. It adds some intensity to it, and everyone's going to try something different to try and get themselves up on the podium, get themselves a board or a trophy.
I mean, Barry Ryan from Erebus said that it was fake racing. It wasn't real. It was more sort of WWE than it was racing. But the point is, I mean, particularly at the moment, I mean, they've got to put on a show. I mean, then they don't have the crowds, and it's not a matter of getting people through the gate. But right now, the only thing that's keeping any sport alive is television ratings, and they're currently negotiating a new broadcast deal, which, as we said, sort of probably 3 months ago, looks like it. Yes, it will be with Channel 7. There will be more free to air races on. In fact, the rumor at the moment is what's going to happen is that at least one race every round will be live, and it will, whether it's a Saturday race or I'm thinking it probably will be a Saturday race. The Saturday race I think will be live on 7 as well as on Foxtel and KO and all those sorts of things. But either way, it's going to be a much better package for most people than the current package with Channel 10. However, it will be way, way less money than they were getting in the past. So they've really got to spice it up. They've got to keep the entertainment value there so that they can get the ratings and get the sponsors in. Foxtel was always on. Foxtel has to have supercar racing, just like it has to have AFL, it has to have NRL, it has to have Test cricket. If it doesn't have those things, it's not going to survive. They just don't have enough. They just don't have enough subscribers watching the general entertainment stuff in this era of Netflix. It is live sport that is keeping that whole thing going. So they really do well. That and another $10 million donation from our federal government. The television rights are very important, and how much they get for the television rights and how long they go on will contribute to how much Archer Capital can sell their share, because they've wanted to be out for quite some time, and they just they're going to lose a bucket of money compared with what they paid on. They're going to take a bath on this, because the amount they paid for it, when they bought into it all those years ago, they're not going to get that sort of money for it now, particularly if this crisis keeps going on. So there's a couple of things they'll want to do. They'll want to get the broadcast rights out of the way, and I think they'll want to at least have a general indication of what's going to happen with the Gen 3 regulations, which I'm sort of tipping will not be in any way as revolutionary as a lot of people think. I think it will be very much evolutionary. I think it'll be basically what they've got now, but sort of modified so that they can get, so they can be more flexible in terms of body shells, so they can get things like the Camaro in, and then possibly things even like, some of the BMWs or Audis or that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know.
Some sort of enticement. And they've also, there's a lot of rules and regulations. There's going to be some protests thrown on if they get some other. So, but if they're still using the same base, the car of the future too, and and just throwing some cladding on top of it, well then, about getting the engines right there and what is it? So comparability.
Yeah, well, if you have a look at what Craig Denyer was saying on In Pit Lane a couple of weeks ago, and that interview is up on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel, Craig was sort of saying about the difference between sort of an upright for a supercar and an upright for a T2 car. The upright for a supercar was about $50,000 or some ridiculous amount, and the upright for a TA2 car was about $200.
I think wasn't it like 1/20th? Oh, it was some ridiculous amount for and that's for a controlled upright as well, though, too, Brett. You're talking about, so everyone can use the same upright, and it's fair, and it's just and also the budget for a whole season as well, too. I think you briefly touched on, didn't you, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, I forget exactly. I'd have to go back and have a look. But in terms of it was certainly under $200,000 for a complete season, and you'd be lucky to get away with a decent round in supercars for cars.
And specifically as well, though, too, the engine obviously has to be pulled down and rebuilt every single time you're basically running at a track for the weekend. As if you're using the same engine all weekend instead of changing it over. I think with the you said this, you could run the engine for 3 meetings even.
Oh, it was along like Aaron Seaton said when we interviewed Aaron, a couple of weeks before that, he'd got right through, I think, about 18 months before they eventually changed the engine out. The engine, it's very much under stress. It's the venerable sort of GM V8, but it's very much under stress, putting out about 540 horsepower. So they can run all day and all week and all year with that, and
like a farm tractor out churning out the water in the channel.
Yeah,
out there in the
just churn it away, and it's there. And they put on some good run. The interesting thing is what people are saying now is that when Archer Capital sell, there's probably only 2 main buyers. One of them will be potentially the Racers Group. Either the Racers Group by themselves or the Racers Group with a consortium of teams and team owners, and that could include people like Roger Penske and Zach Brown and those sort of people, because they're the people who've got the money to do that sort of thing, and they might see Roger Penske having a real financial involvement in Australian supercar racing could be a huge boom for that category when you consider he now owns IndyCar as well, and he owns the Indianapolis 500 and the Speedway.